I learned it too today. And I got thrown off there just at the end. Jaya Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Gaura Chandra, Jaya Dvaita Chandra, Jaya Jaya Nityananda. If you look in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's different padas that are sung at the beginning of each chapter. Not every one, but, let's say out of the 63 chapters, maybe 25 or 30 of them, about half of them, will have a specific song at the beginning of it. It's called a pada. It's a short verse. Actually, our kirtan style is called Podavali. Vaishnava Podavali. It's the kirtan style that came up in the... Oh, yeah, sorry. Thanks, Kat. There's a kirtan style that came up like around the time that Columbus discovered America, quote unquote, discovered America. That's actually not such a cool thing to say these days. That more or less corresponds to the time that Columbus came to the U.S. and began to exploit and exterminate and genocidally wipe out the native peoples who've been living here for thousands of years. Around that time period, there was a bhakti movement surging up all over northern India. It had been going on for some millennia, actually, in South India, going back to the Agama literature, and then with Ramanujacharya, it had been fomenting for millennia. And then around the kind of close of the Middle Ages and the beginning of the Renaissance period, it exploded in a big way. Even prior to Mahaprabhu's appearance. There was poets, Vidyapati and Jayadev Goswami, Kalidas. These are Sanskrit poets who also wrote in vernacular languages as well. That was a big thing that happened, is that instead of songs and kirtans being sung in Sanskrit, people began to write in the local language. And so you have Bengali kirtan, Brajbuli kirtan, Brajbhasha kirtan, different local vernacular languages, and people started writing in those languages. And that's Vaishnava Padavali kirtan, and it just exploded when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came on the scene. It just... You just do your best. You don't have to leave. Just do your best. It's cool, Shraddha. That's Shraddha, right? Yeah, just hang out with them and do whatever. Do your best, but I'm not going to sweat it. You came all the way down. We're happy to have you. He might sweat it. It looks like he wants to boogie, but I'm okay with it. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came on the scene, and it just exploded. And the Hare Krishna movement is the international outreach branch of this bhakti explosion that took place right around the Renaissance period, that was the result of thousands of years of egalitarianism and simplicity, fighting to overwhelm the Vedic orthodoxy which had dominated Indian spirituality from very far back, from the ancient period. This happens, something spiritual will occur, there'll be a movement that's created, and then you start to codify it. There's a reason for it. You lose your charismatic leader, and then you want to figure out how to recreate that charisma. And so you write stuff down, and you start to come up with a list of rules. If you follow all these rules, then you are empowered or you're rightly situated. Actually, the Puritans who came over to the U.S. as part of the first wave of settlers from England, the first wave of Protestants came over to the U.S., the Puritans had this thing: if you want to know if you were saved or not by Jesus, you look for who was rich. And the people who were rich were the people who had Jesus' blessing. You always want to figure out like who's doing things right, who's made the transformation, who's successful. And so what happens is, in the beginning, you've got a charismatic leader. You have a revolutionary movement. They're usually kind of militant. They're very, very otherworldly. They're very transcendental. They are fighting against an establishment. But then as soon as that leader passes on, you have to figure out a way to transfer that charisma and transfer that, really like what boils down to authority and vision. And then you start to write stuff down and codify it, and you make a system, and then people learn that system, and then they're sure, like if you want to be a life coach, you got to have a system, you got to write a book, you got to have a system, you got to have a course that you tell people. If it's too laissez-faire and it's too spontaneous, people don't want to pay money and sign up for it. And so you got to have something a little surgical and a little laid out and step by step that people can follow. As soon as you start trying to write it down and you make it into a step-by-step thing, then people can start faking it. Is that door open? Maybe tell them to be quiet. Leave the door open, but tell them to be quiet. Last warning, otherwise they can come in and join us for class. I want to leave the door open because there's a fair few of us here. We want to keep that nice cross-ventilation going. You should be wearing a mask. You got a mask there? Wrap each other around your face. If you got a mask, you should utilize it. Yeah. Just for everybody else's sake. You may not care. Maybe you had your vaccine. But unless you want to get a V tattooed on your forehead, just go ahead and put your mask on. Thank you. As soon as you write it down, then people can start to fake it. And they just, they follow the rules. And thank you all, by the way, for putting on your mask if you have it. If you don't have them, it's okay, you can stay. But thank you for those of you who have masks for putting them on. Great to see you. Prahlad Priya Prabhu. We thought we were going to lose you. I was up on the altar praying with tears in my eyes that you made it. Thank you for making it. We're happy to see you. As soon as you start writing it down, you come up with your set of rules. Then people start to exploit that, and they fake it, and they follow the rules, but their heart's not in it. And they follow the letter of the law, but not the spirit of the law, and then you got to do the whole thing all over again. Krishna even says when there's a dharmasya glani, there's a decline of dharma, then sambhavami yuge yuge. I appear, I manifest myself again and again. And that's because yoga nashta, because the science gets destroyed over time. And so Krishna has to come and reestablish it again and again. It's like a forever dance. It's something wonderful will happen, and then it starts to mission drift, and it starts to erode away, and you start to replace primary values with secondary values because they're easier to fake, and you lose that je ne sais quoi, that special something that's very difficult to define, that's somewhat ineffable and undefinable. Are you guys following this? So that happened 5 centuries ago, and the Hare Krishna movement is really the aftermath of that. It's the natural consequence of that. There was a bhakti revival, a bhakti renaissance that took place all over North India, and it was set up. Some of the infrastructure had been getting put together for ages, but it really exploded like a golden volcano of divine love, to quote one Vaishnava about 50 years ago. He called it a golden volcano of divine love. That was Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance. And then when I was just reading today, I read it in English. And I'm always untrusting when I read something in English. And it had tell them to come in. There's a lot of them? Then chastise them. Try and look fierce, cat. If there's just a couple of them, we can come in and then they'll be shamed into quietude. If you get too many of them, it's a volcano of nonsense. We can't stop it. I lost my train of thought.
You're skeptical of English.
Yeah, I'm always skeptical when somebody half quotes something in English. So when I found the source of it. There was a book called the Narottam Vilas, and there was an appendix to that book written by one of Narottam's disciples. It's a parichaya. It's an appendix. And in that appendix, this 18th century Vaishnava saint named Narayan Maitra, commentating on his guru's work, he wrote a poetic description of who Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is that I'd never read before, and it blew my mind. And I felt like I discovered some kind of like a gem. Like it's like stunned me. That I wanted to share it with you guys today. He told a story that one day Krishna was holding Radharani's hand in Vrindavan. And Krishna said, I want you to give me something. I want to beg some charity from you. And Radharani was in a magnanimous mood, like she's always in. And she said, okay, what would you like? And Krishna said, I want your love. I want the love you have for me. I want you to give it to me. This is going to require some explanation, what exactly that means. It makes sense if you have a background in Indian dramaturgy, but it doesn't translate well into English. I want you to give me the love you have for me. And we'll come back to that in a second. And Lalita, who was there on the scene, she jumped in and said, she can't do it. It's impossible. And Krishna said, anything's possible. This is what I'm begging. And Lalita said, not only is it impossible, but you couldn't cope with her love. It's too heavy. And Lalita said, sometimes Radharani, her body becomes so hot that we put mounds of chandan on her body. And this, again, it requires some kind of an appreciation of Indian culture, but in hot places in India, ceremonially, in the morning, as it's warming up, people will put chandan on your forehead, usually mixed with camphor and other cooling substances, like kush. Thank you. Try and just grab a couple of them and hurt them. I'm just kidding. You'll put dollops of chandan on your forehead and sometimes also on your chest and other parts of your body, especially in South India. And I don't know why I looked at you. From South? Yeah, that's why I looked at you. And it cools you down. It's like this thick goop, and it cools you down. It's like a natural air conditioner. And even a little bit of wind will touch it, and then it really makes it nice and cooling and refreshing. So they said sometimes we'll put mountains of chandan on Radharani's body, and it'll immediately dry up, and like sheets of paper will just fall off her body. You follow the analogy? A beautiful analogy, like a tragic and beautiful, both. It's Shakespearean. And then we'll make a bed of wet lotus leaves, lotus petals, and we'll lie her down on it, and they'll burn up. You can't deal with the truth of Radharani's love for you. You can't. You can't. Of course, this just excited Krishna more, and he thought, I want to experience what it's like to be Radharani. I want to experience her love for me. I'm not done with the story yet. There's another half of the story. I'm going to pause right here, and we're going to explore this a little bit. There's a word that's kind of like, it's a ubiquitous word that's used in I described this kind of Vedic orthodoxy and then the Agama literature in the South Indian Bhakti revolution against that orthodoxy, and then how that then led and fomented into some precursors to Mahaprabhu and the Mahaprabhu himself and the Bhakti Renaissance, which has resulted in all of us sitting in this room today. Like if you're in this room today, Mahaprabhu and his movement got to you. Like if you're signed up for the course and you're in the building where the course is being taught, then our advertising got to you. Mahaprabhu's advertising from 5 centuries ago got to you. There's this word that is you find it in the oldest stratum of Vedic literature, and it's used up until today. And probably most of you know this word. And it's a key word if you want to understand what we're striving for. Anybody know what the word is? And the word is Ras. So you're like your big boss, Ras. And I'm like, no, we're going to call you Kirtan Ras. So this word Ras, like will be pronounced like the name Russ. 2 of my kids are named. The word Ras shows up in the name of 2 of my children. Actually 3. Sharadiya Ras, sorry, I got too many. Sharadiya Ras, Rasik Shekhar, and Rasik Endra. So 3 of them have this name in it. Ras was originally the moonlight was called Ras in the Rig Veda because it was cooling and it was Shushitala. It was very cooling, like Koti Chandra, like millions of moons. The moonbeams are sweet and gentle compared to the sun of India, which is very, very powerful. Only time I've ever been to a tanning salon in my life is right before going to India, sometimes. Like maybe 2 or 3 times right before going to India. There was no sun, it was the middle of winter. I tan up really quickly because I'm Serbian, so I just need to be out in the sun a little bit, a couple days, I'm okay. But if I go to India and I'm real pasty, because it's winter and I haven't had a chance to sit in the sun. The sun is fierce. It's not like nice. You can't just sit out in the sun like a lagoon. You sit out in the sun. It doesn't work like that. The sun really, it clips you, and you get sunstroke real easy. So a couple times I've actually gone to a tanning salon right before going to India just to get a little tan, so I can go to India so I can hang in the sun and not have to worry about getting sunstroke. And I'm taking a tour of people to India, and I got to be on my game. So the moon is synonymous with gentleness, and actually the word Soumya in Sanskrit. Soumya means what in Sanskrit? In Hindi or any Indic language? Soumya? Huh? Soumya? Soft. Pleasing also, beautiful, pleasing, it also works. It's from Soma, which is the word for the moon. So the moonbeams were called Ras because they communicated this sweetness and this beauty and this gentleness that was otherworldly. And that term, the term has been used, like I said, in Sanskrit and vernacular literature since that time, going all the way back to the Rig Veda up until present. And at one point, the word Soumya was utilized by the dramaturgists. Just like you have Greek tragedies that were written, and even if you look at modern day movies, they fought. Like, if you ever wonder why, if you go to see a movie like a Disney movie for children, why they always are like this close to dying? It doesn't make sense. Like, why would you want to have a bunch of 5 and 6-year-olds watch a movie where the protagonists almost die? It doesn't make any sense. It's because they're following a Greek tragedy model, and they did studies, and if you don't follow the model of the hero's journey and the Greek tragedy, people don't feel right when they leave the movie. It's like the Teletubbies. Like, they just kind of hang out and do nothing, and there's no plot development and character development that goes on. And it doesn't make sense. So even if you watch a G-rated movie, there's always this like brush with death that occurs, and then they survive that brush with death, and then you feel some catharsis. You feel like if you ever watched a really good movie, you're crying at the end of the movie. There's no reason for you to cry. It's just on a screen. It's like there's celluloid heroes on a screen. They're not real. But you're crying because they did a good job of communicating their journey, and through them, you experience something that on your own you wouldn't have experienced, something bigger than you. That's why people watch sports also. They live and die with their team. So the Indian dramaturgists, they use a theory of rasa, that the primary purpose of drama is catharsis. And the actors on the stage want to evoke emotions from you. One of my least favorite types of dance is Indian Bharatanatyam. And I could explain a whole reason why, but for one of the many reasons I'm not a big fan of Indian dance is a lot of times it will just consist of really fancy makeup, and then the dancer looking at you and like making funny looks at you and the other characters on the stage, and that's what their expertise is. And if you look at the actual dance moves, it's hip hop and ballet and tricking and parkour. It's just so remedial. It's like, come on. And like the whole thing is like it's all going on up here. And so like a proper scene in an Indian movie might be a mother is looking at her child and her eyes are moving in various ways, and she cries, and you're watching her look at her child, and then you start crying because she's somehow able to embody motherhood to such a superlative degree that you are feeling maternal instincts. Even if you're a man, you feel maternal instincts, and you experience the feelings of motherhood by vicarious alignment with the expert actor and their mastery of facial expressions. That's Indian drama. And that magic, when a soft-hearted person, what's called a sahridoy, when they watch an expertly performed drama and they're able to disport themselves and enter into what the characters are doing and experience the emotions that those characters have spent years perfecting their ability to communicate them, and you fall apart the seams in a movie and it reminds you of your own childhood to such an extent that it becomes a psychodrama. That's what Indian drama has been trying to do for thousands of years. And the word they use for that thing that you're trying to capture, that je ne sais quoi difficult thing you're trying to capture, that's called ras. It's a thing, it's a substance. There's no clean English translation. Sometimes we say mellow or flavor or experience or ecstasy, which means like an ecstasy within yourself, but X means outside yourself. There's a whole bunch of words people come up with. But it's almost like you have to experience it to really understand what's being talked about. Because here's the thing. The rus of human emotions isn't what the dramaturgists were ultimately trying to communicate. They were trying to give you an ecstatic, rapturous experience of the divine. And the dramaturgists were also theologians. And some of our greatest saints were also screenplay writers, playwrights. And they would use ornamental language and the setting of a drama and its tragedy and catharsis to communicate to us something beyond this world. And they wanted to create a window into that world. And we could pass through that world if our hearts became soft enough and we fell in love with the protagonists and the players and aligned with them enough for that magical transference to occur that didn't just make you remember your childhood, but actually made you remember your ultimate relationship with the divine. Did you follow that? And just to appreciate this term ras, it also got used by the alchemists. And there were the rasa siddhas. And rasas were tonics, potions they made that were supposed to make you invulnerable. And so this whole culture of rasa actually became alchemy in India. And the rasayans, the tonics they made, they're called rasayans from rasa. And they were also either for health, or sometimes they were trying to discover the philosopher's stone, or they were trying to discover the fountain of youth, or what have you. We also use that term ras. What we're after is bhakti ras. We're after the flavor of a loving devotional relationship with Krishna. Now, the Indian dramaturgists, they came up with this far-out thing. They had the realization that in any loving exchange, there's an ashray and a vishay. A lover and a beloved. Vishay literally means object, and ashray means shelter. So there's the person who possesses love. They're the shelter of love. They're the lover. And then there is the object of love, the beloved, the vishay. And the vishay can also be an ashray. So I love Shuddhi Prabhu. And my love for him is increasing as the years go on. You guys know that Shuddhi Prabhu chants 64 rounds of japa a day? In India, if somebody's very rich, you call them a crorepati. A crorepati means an owner of tens of millions of rupees. And so we also use the same term. We call somebody a lakshapati. A lakshapati is someone who chants 100,000 names of Krishna a day, which corresponds to 64 rounds of japa. Kshudi Prabhu is a lakshapati. He's a wealthy man because he chants 64 rounds a day. Sorry for outing you. But I love Kshudi Prabhu, and so I also like to glorify him.
I love you too.
I know you do. I know you do. I feel that. And so we can see here, but you don't love me as a lakshapati because I'm not chanting 64 rounds a day. I chant 16 rounds a day. I've been keeping that vow for 32 years, but I don't chant 64 rounds yet. I chanted some extra japa today, but I don't do it every day like you. So I love Kshudi Prabhu because he chants 100,000 rounds, 100,000 names of Krishna a day, amongst many other reasons. But the specialness of my love for you is because of who you are. And his love for me is not my love for him because I'm a different person than he is. Do you follow? So the Ashraya has a particular love for the Vishaya and vice versa, and it's based on the personal qualities that each individual possesses. Therefore, Kshudi Prabhu can never know exactly how I feel in my love for him. Because my love for him is based on who he is, and he is himself, and I have a special ability to love him. There's something special about me. I can love you, but you can't love yourself in exactly the same way. This was the core of Indian drama. You're good, Janava. Yeah, my Guru Maharaj has invited him to speak. He was at the Cross Maidan Festival. It was 50 years ago. 50 years ago in 1971. And so he's going to give a lecture because he was at that original festival. He got Brahmin initiation at that festival.
First initiation.
He got first. This shows how bad my memory is. He got first initiation at that festival. And my Guru went there and became a devotee at that festival.
Yes, it was Saturday, Monday, March 29th, which it is in India now.
So can you please take your leave, Prabhu?
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's give Shri Prabhu a round of applause. So this little exchange, it's like you can't even explain it. You have to actually give an example of it. Then people get it. In philosophy, this is called ostensive philosophy. Sometimes there's the word ostensibly. That means apparently, but not maybe really. But ostensive philosophy is how do you describe color to a person who's born blind? How do you describe color to a person who's born blind? You cannot. If you want to teach somebody what color is, you teach a 2-year-old. You say, that's red, that's blue, that's green. I've taught all my children about colors. You have to actually point to it. If they're blind and they can't see it, they can't understand it. They have to see it to understand it. They have to experience it to understand it. There's a term in philosophy, there's ostensive philosophy. It's called anubhuti in Sanskrit. So, Kshudi Prabhu loves me. I love him. I'm the Ashraya, the lover. He's the beloved. But he doesn't exactly know how I feel about him. So in Krishna, I've been signed out because my device is signed in from another device. I'm thinking, hey, Gopal Chandra, give me a thumbs up if you can see, if you can hear me. Thank you, sir. Okay, I'm still good. So Krishna was asking Radharani, I want to know what it's like to be you. Krishna one day saw his reflection in a jeweled column. He was walking past a jeweled column and he caught his reflection. It stunned him. That's the purpose of rust. If you want to know if you have rust, it stuns you. It paralyzes you. What's the use of the bowman's arrow And what's the use of the poet's words if they don't pierce the heart? That's a famous dramaturgical statement that's used, it shows up in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Rust stuns you. It transports you. It reveals something to you that you could never build a stairway to heaven and see. It's experiential. When our theologians, when our savants really want to communicate the deepest parts of our tradition, they wrote plays. Lalita Madhav, Vidagdha Madhav, Chaitanya Chandradoya Nataka. They wrote plays. And they're like actually plays, like with you have a cast and settings, and the plays are performed even to this day. And you go and watch the play. And if you live a pure life, which then allows you to give a true hearing to the play and a true watching of the play, because you've purified your heart, then when you watch the play, you're transported. The Bhagavatam essentially is written like a play. It uses the same dramaturgical language and poetic devices. And when you read the Bhagavatam and you're in a proper mindset, you see Krishna. Miracles happen. Our entire tradition is an attempt to take this lightning and put it in a bottle and figure out a way to transmit it to the next generation through space and time without adulterating it. And it's a fool's errand, because the nature of this world is entropy sets in, and Krishna must appear again and again to put that lightning in a bottle again and again, and then pass on that torch. You guys following from the beginning of class when I mentioned that? So they're trying to communicate this. They're trying to help you understand something it defies some kind of codification. But nonetheless, they're trying to do it. And how they do it? They write poetry, they write plays. If you're trained, if you're pure, if you have awakened within yourself the prerequisite greed, there's a whole other thing. With greed, you have to be greedy for this. That greed overwhelms your greed for material things, and you begin to dedicate your life to spiritual pursuits. That this is what I'm here for. You're good, Carolina. Okay, but you can stay. I don't care if your kid makes noise. I'm happy to see you. It's totally up to you what you want to do. Okay. All right. I'm grateful you guys came all the way down. It's our first big festival since Govardhan Puja, and we don't want anybody to come all the way here and have to leave. So just do your best, and we're good. Where was I? Lolium. Lolium is actually a different word. I was with lobe. Lolium is a different word. Also means greed, but it's one of the symptoms of bhav, whereas lobe is the prerequisite. I'm not going to go into that any further. Get right back on track. Even the greed, even the desire to pursue spirituality as your life's work is a gift. Even getting that desire is an art and science. And then walking that path, that's a whole other art and science. But even embarking on that path, Krishna says if you're even jigyasu, if you're curious about spirituality, you're far beyond the followers of the Vedas, the ritual followers of the Vedas. Just curiosity about spiritual life takes you far beyond them. Even that curiosity, that desire is itself a tremendous gift, a tremendous boon. Anyway, if you are in the right stage of purification and you watch the plays and you read the Bhagavatam, miracles happen. So Krishna was saying, Krishna saw his reflection and he thought, and he was like stopped, he was like stunned at this beautiful person. And then he realized it was him. It's like, what do you get for the person who has everything? You give them your love. Because no matter what they have, your love has your free will attached to it, and therefore they don't have that unless you give it to them. So Krishna's omnipotent, he's omnibenevolent, but it's not unreasonable to think that Krishna, we have to choose to give our love to Krishna. There's nothing wrong with the idea that Krishna may be infinite and also increasing. We have this idea that infinitude means stasis. But there's no reason to presuppose that. There's no reasonable reason to presuppose that. Why couldn't God be perfect and infinite and also growing? We use this language. We say there's Purna, Purnatar, and Purnatama. Complete, more complete, and most complete. Indicating that even within completeness and wholeness, there's still echelons. And there's still room for growth. This goes all the way back to Ishopanishad. Purnat Purnamadaya Purnam Eva Vashishate. After you create complete things from the complete, still that thing is complete. This idea in our tradition was thousands of years in the making. Krishna wanted to know what it would be like to love himself. He wanted to know what it was about him that was so wonderful. And Krishna's a singularity. So the one thing he could never do is he could never love somebody else and understand what they're seeing in him, because he's the source of all creation. He's the abode of all good qualities. And your love for somebody, it's their wonderful qualities are what attract you to them. And so Krishna is filled with wonderful qualities, and therefore his devotees love him so much that Krishna even gets bewildered when he sees the amount that devotees love Krishna, because of this weird phenomenon that the qualities of the beloved determine the exaltation of the love of the lover. Did you guys follow that? The qualities of Krishna are what allow us to have superlative and otherworldly love of him. He's just that wonderful. This is the natural consequence of a philosophy of grace. So, Krishna wondered, what is it about me? I want to know what my devotees are experiencing. And he said, when I look at Radharani's love, it's singular. Krishna's love is diffuse, it's everywhere. But Radharani's love is singular. And he's like, I want to know, how is it, her love is so selfless. It's so singular. This is her prem mahima. It's the glory of her love. And he wanted to know what it was about him. And he noticed that the devotees seem to be even more ecstatic than he is. Because of this phenomenon, that your experience of the fruit of love is depending on what you choose to love. That's why we think like Shakespeare is just wasted on the materialist. Like Romeo and Juliet committing suicide for each other. It's so pathetic. You might love a dog or a cat, but why not love Krishna, who made all of that? As a nursery rhyme to teach our kids. You repose your love in Krishna, you found the perfect lovable object. You can have the most romantic love for Krishna. You love a body, it's just like 5 minutes before it starts to decay on you. And so we feel like Shakespeare in a lot of ways was wasted on the materialists. Our greatest writers of tragedy and romantic poetry were theologians. They were actually writing about Krishna. That's the big secret, the Song of Solomon in the Hebrew Bible, in the story of Layla in Islam, and in Middle Eastern culture, and in so many of the stories of romance within India. It's actually about Radha and Krishna. It's about the soul and God. It's about Radha and Krishna. The playwrights would be hired by kings, and they would have to write about the kings and their queens. But they were actually writing about Radha and Krishna. They would write in these double entendres, where the verses had double meanings. And then it was left to the later generations of devotees to unpack it and see what they were really trying to say. You guys following this? So Krishna saw his reflection and wondered what would it be like. What's the singularness of her love and the purity of it? What is it about me that only my devotees can taste? And what is it about the ecstasy they feel that like I'm even bewildered by? And so he picked his greatest devotee, Radharani, and he went to her one day and he said to her, I would like to beg from you your love, not your love for me. I want you to give me your love so I can love myself the way you love me and I can get an insight. And then Alita was like, you can't deal with it. It's too much. Her love is too heavy. Her love is too profound. It burns wet lotus petals. It dries up mountains of Chandan. It's beyond you. And Krishna, that just, of course, increased Krishna's eagerness. And since the Radharani said, I'll give you my love, but then Radharani said, but I'm going to embrace you. Just give me a second. We good? Okay, thank you. I'll give you my love, but I'm also going to embrace you. And that's why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is golden. Because Radharani said, once you experience my love, you're going to start dancing. And you're going to fall down like a tree that's been knocked down by the wind. And I don't want you to become bruised and harmed. And so I'm going to embrace you and envelop you in my golden color. And that's why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is golden. Did you guys get it? Did you understand? Not really. That's probably my fault. Who thinks they got it? Let's go with Prahlad Priya Prabhu. Go ahead.
You said it all?
Don't do that to me, man. I need some feedback. Come on. I mean, you do whatever you want. You're my elder, but...
This is exactly how I was taught when I was young. A brief description of the Lord, wanting to know what it felt like to love Him unconditionally. Hence, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appears in His golden form. So I'm just repeating what you said.
Let me say this. Thank you. That was perfect. Thank you, Prabhu. Let me say this. This is a difficult thing to appreciate. God in growth. A deity in growth. A deity in love. The growth of the divine. How perfect things become even better. How Purna moves to Purnatama. It's a difficult thing to wrap your head around because it goes against many of the standard tropes and ideas we have about the nature of the divine, namely that Krishna is absolute and not relative. Therefore, Krishna doesn't need anything. Krishna is absolute, and therefore Krishna is not vulnerable. Krishna is not affected by others. Krishna is perfect, and therefore there's no room for growth. Krishna is omnipotent, and therefore he has everything he wants. He's omnibenevolent, and therefore there's nothing more for him to gain. And so these sort of classical theological mores and ideas, they all have to all be subverted to really appreciate who Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is. And if you try to codify it too much, you ruin it. It has to kind of happen in real time. Like if you break down, for instance, if you break down dance moves too much, you lose the fluidity that goes into the dance moves. You can break down certain portions of them, but eventually they have to all come together into one moment and you kind of like, you do the move. It's the same thing with wrestling or boxing combinations. Here's what I thought of, I just want to say it. Or a double leg takedown, which is also involves a level change and a move forward, other things. I used to use dancing because I figured it'd be more appreciable by you guys. But there's the leap and the twist and the spin, like my kids right now are learning how to do front and back flips at the beach. At a certain point, you just have to go for it, and you have to flip. You can't ease your way into a flip. It requires, or a dunk. It requires a launch. Or a deadlift. You can't ease your way into a deadlift. I mean, you can with a lighter weight, but if you really want to go for it, it's a full commitment of everything you got and then some. So, I want to teach you guys this radical idea of Vishaya and Ashraya, a lover and a beloved. I want to introduce you to the idea of Rus, that the purpose of life for Indians for thousands of years has been to get this special thing called Rus, and it was differently conceived of by different groups of people. And our tradition understands it as being this communion and this ecstatic, rapturous experience of communion with divinity. I want to show you how all the poetry was designed to create a moment where you just kind of get it. And I stopped halfway through the story and tried to explain all of those cultural mores and also theological underpinning ideas that have to be in place. Then I told the rest of the story, and my hope was when I told the rest of the story, you guys would get what a beautiful concept Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is. The Lord experiencing the love of his devotee, which can expand without limit because the repository of that loving sentiment is infinite. And Krishna is the ultimate lovable object. And the specialness of the position of a devotee, and how Krishna is even eager to do what's impossible to do in an Indian drama. But being infinite and omnipotent, Krishna is able to have such a desire. And the birth of our mission is Krishna's fulfillment of his own selfish desire to experience the love of his devotees, which opens a door for us to also experience the superlative love that Radharani has for Krishna. And as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to give an example, drinks the strong wine of Radharani's love for him, he begins to dance and chant and sing like a drunkard. And as he's trying to drink and dance and sing, he starts to spill. And all those drops of that elixir, that tonic, that rus, that are falling out of his mouth as he sings and dances like a madman, they fall all around him on the ground. And for his devotees and followers who've taken up his mission, they get to also drown in those drops of rus falling from the Lord's own experience of the love of Radharani. And that's Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Did you guys get it that time? I don't know if you did, but I did my best. So, I did my best. And so, our movement, your movement if you're here, because at least you're participating on the level of being here, and if you ever pick up the torch, pick up the cross and follow us, then it's fully your movement. But this movement that you chose to spend your Sunday participating in is the natural consequence of this radical experiment in love that Krishna did in heaven, where he wanted to know what it would be like to be his own devotee. He became ecstatic. He broke down all boundaries. He gave that love out freely. He inundated the world with an ocean of rus, and the method he did that through was the easy and simple chanting of Krishna's names. And so Krishna is in his names. Radharani chants Krishna's names. Radharani does kirtan in Goloka Vrindavan. That's what she's doing all day long. Mother Yashoda is doing kirtan too. They're singing about Krishna. And that Prem Nam Sankirtan, which is the treasure of Goloka Vrindavan, came down to this world and became available to everybody for the taking. And Krishna's available for the price of a song. Okay. Thank you very much for your kind attention. We did our best. We'll do a kirtan, and then we'll take some prasad. If you want to leave now, it would be foolish because we're about to do a really nice kirtan and have an arti. But if you did want to leave for some reason, we have food that you can take with you now. And so we want to keep the aisles as clear as possible and people moving. Keep your masks on. Try to cluster together with the people you're, what do you call it, distancing with. Do your little pod thing. Let's try and keep it as safe as possible. We're super ecstatic to be able to have live festivals again. Thank you all so very much for coming. And we'll do kirtan now. Hare Krishna.